Hello, I'm Janet Whittle. I've been painting in watercolour now for 20 years and I would like to show you some of the techniques that I use when painting flowers. The flowers that we're going to do first are Californian poppies. Now these are a lovely white flower. So we mist the paper first and then using a large brush just join all the bobbles together just so that you're wetting the paper evenly. You must have your colours mixed up first before you do this, because if you don't, there isn't time while the paper is drying to mix them. Right. Now when you put on a watercolour wash, you must load your brush with the colour, because if you don't, it will stay in one place and the paint won't leave the brush easily. And you'll be forcing it onto the paper. This is just to take the whiteness off the petals a little bit so that they're not quite stark white flowers. And I'm going to drop in 1 or 2 blushes of lemon just to warm it just a little bit. When you've got all the paint on, what you can do then to spread the colour is just to tip the board just so that you don't get any brush strokes in it. And then just lay it down to dry. This wash is now dry, so what we're going to do is with just clear water and a large brush, we're going to wet up to the masking line. Now the masking line is continuous, because if it's not, the paint from the outside wash will seep through into the flower and you don't want this to happen. So load your brush with clear water and just apply it over your first wash right up to the masking line. We can't use a mister on this wash because you don't want the insides of the main flowers to get damp at all. If you don't take it up to the masking line, when you put this wash on, it will leave a halo round the flowers, so the shape of the flowers won't actually show up. Just tip the board so that it flows, and if you hold it against the light, you'll be able to see any patches that you've missed, because these will be matte, not shiny. Doesn't want to be running in water, but just evenly damp. If you find it's too wet, just leave it to dry for just about 15-30 seconds before you put the paint on. The first colour that I'm going to put on is cadmium yellow. So I'm going to load my brush and just put it on as though the sunlight's coming through the foliage. If you put the brightest colour on first, what happens when you go a little bit darker is this colour will glow through and it will mix on the paper. Rinse your brush. If you don't rinse your brush from when it's had yellow in it, it will contaminate the next colour and you don't want that. This wash doesn't need to go on completely all over, but just in areas where you're going to want foliage. I know it looks quite frightening when you put it on, but 1, it's going to diffuse, 2, it's going to dry lighter. You really have to frighten yourself when you put this wash on, otherwise it won't be dark enough. See how the paint leaves the brush when you've loaded it? This is why you should always mix up more paint than you think you're going to need, because you will need it, even if it's throughout the painting. It's right up to the line. You can see the flowers now as they're isolated by the masking fluid. So just tip the board and your colours will mix on the paper. Now when you feel you're happy with the wash and you don't want to add any more paint, dry it flat, because then when the shine's gone off it, you can then dry it with a hairdryer. Now we've let that dry. Now the next stage is to do a little bit more drawing. Just draw in a few more stalks and leaves. Now using a selection of the colours that you've already mixed for your background, I'm just going to find the composition that I've just drawn by doing the negative shapes. Now load your brush and put it in simply. Don't push the paint around too much, and vary it as you go through. So change colours, some blues, some yellows. What you're doing in effect is putting in another background. The more simple you keep your brush strokes, the easier the paint will go on. You won't need to cover all the background all the time, just vary it. Don't go too dark on this wash, because what you're going to do is you're going to cut out again in the spaces with some real darks to bring out the flowers. The paint will only go where you've wet the paper, so you are in control. And that's your first cutting out. Now the next stage is taking off the masking fluid. Just rub this with your finger, but make sure that the underground wash that you've just put on is bone dry before you do this, otherwise you'll smudge the paint. Sometimes the paint, when you put it on in your background, will have jumped over the masking fluid, so you can just remove some of these little bits of paint and tidy it up a little bit before you move on to the next stage. Now, because you have natural oils in your hand, I would then remove the bits of masking fluid with a brush. And then you're ready for the next stage. Now I'm going to put one or two of the folds in the flowers now, using a mix of cobalt blue with permanent rose. Now using your reference, if you're using photographic reference, as I'm doing on this, just check to see where you've caught the sunlight on the flowers and make sure you're consistent and that the sunlight is coming in the same direction on all three of the main flowers. Now dampen first, just so that you keep soft edges, not too wet. Load your brush and just drop in a soft edge. And work your way round so that you can see one petal against another. Now my light is coming from the right, so the petals on the other side will be deeper and they'll catch the sunlight on this side. So I'm going to try and be consistent with the light coming through this way with the next lot of shadows that I do. That petal needs to be shown against the other one, so that will be a hard edge. This will be a soft edge. So I'm just going to soften that off like that. The folds of petals will be wider towards the edge and then thinner as they come in. So you work, when you're doing a fold, you work from the outside, coming in narrower and narrower until it goes to the centre. Just go from flower to flower, waiting for the others to dry. There's no need to finish one flower first and then move on, because then you can pull the whole painting together at the same time. And that's your next stage, and just let this dry now. Now we're going to put the centres in. Using two colours, I've mixed up cadmium yellow with a little bit of orange. I'm going to start not with the middle one, but with the outside one. Put in the yellow, varying the outline as you do it, going into little bits of detail there. Load with the second colour and drop it in towards the bottom so that it just softens up. More on the side away from the light, and move on to the second one. Varying the outline again. Loading with your second colour and dropping it in on the side away from the light. Now the background flowers I'm going to do in the same way, but slightly duller. I don't want these to come forward too much because these three are my focal flowers. If you do, it tends to give you a wallpaper effect if you do all the flowers the same. It's just too much. The next stage is to put a little bit more depth in the background. You do this by cutting out again into the negative shapes you created in the last step. So I've mixed two colours, I've mixed sap green and I've mixed viridian and burnt umber so that I can go a tone darker. I'll just make one or two more shapes. You can use two brushes for this. If you use a number 4 and a number 6, you can keep both brushes with separate colours on, which will save you time. So I'm going to create another leaf there. you're just doing a few more space shapes. I'm going to take another leaf through here, just doing the space shape. Don't make these too small, otherwise they won't be so effective. I'm just darkening underneath the petals to get maximum counter change, which will mean your lightest light against your darkest dark. Where you can manage to do this, it will give your painting a lot more punch. This stage you will pull the painting together, so you'll be working in little bits all over it. So using your same cobalt blue and permanent rose mix, starting wider at the edge of the petal and just pulling it in. Do vary these, don't make it too stripy. Softening them out where you need to, so that they're not all the same. Use your reference photographs at this stage. You can have one or two more hard edges, but don't overdo it, otherwise it will just not have the same effect. It will look a little bit overworked. But while you're doing the veining, it must follow the contour of the flower, otherwise you'll flatten it out. So curve the veining, just so that it gives the petal a little bit of movement. You can always do it pale and then just deepen it a little bit towards the bottom, and it will soften up and not be too hard an edge. Go a little bit deeper behind here. The thing is not to do the same all over. You must vary it. Otherwise, like I said earlier, you will get a wallpaper effect if you don't. Just concentrate on the focal flowers. These are the ones that will have most detail in. Now I think there's enough detail on there now. I'm going to go back into the background and just sort out one or two more space shapes to make the flowers show up just a little bit more, but only the focal flowers to begin with. Just breaking up that one, just so that it's not quite such a big shape. Making that into more of a leaf. Following this one through, so that the intrusion in that petal just shows up just a little bit more. Now on these background flowers, I'm just going to divide the petals by tone just a little bit more than they are, but you don't want too much detail on the background ones, because you don't want them to come forward, because detail will bring the flower forward. Softening the edges, because as well as detail, hard edges will also bring the flowers forward. So keep these shapes very simple. And just this petal here. Now I will let that dry and take all the pencil lines off, and if you've done your tonal values correctly, you won't miss your pencil lines now, because in actual fact there are no lines, they're only changes in tone, and if you've done your shadows correctly then you won't miss them at all. Now I'm going to deepen the centres just a little bit more with a small brush, only on the focal flowers. bleaching it out towards the light areas, and then just a tiny bit more on the flowers that are out of focus, but not too much because you don't want those coming forward. Now it's time to do 1 or 2 shadows. As the flowers fall and the light is coming this way, the stalks and the leaves will be have a shadow cast on them from the flowers. So using a bluey green, some of the colour that you used in the background as well, you just push back as the leaves go under the flowers, as though they're just shaded just a little bit. This also aids counter change of your focal flowers, shows them up just a little bit more. Just putting in 1 or 2 veins on the leaves. Now this leaf that came up here went over the top of this bloom, and so it will be dark against light, and then as it comes down it goes into light against dark. Now this side is quite a soft area here, so rather than do negative shapes, what I am going to do is I'm going to paint some more leaves in a bluey green again, dark against light. So just freehand, just soft, they're just shapes, no detail. And just putting in dark, and then the rest of that bud can go light. So it just shows up on its own really. I'm just keeping the leaves very simple on this, just suggesting form. Now we just need 1 or 2 little bits more detail in the centres now they've dried. With a very tiny brush and the deep brown colour, you can use burnt umber, just 1 or 2 little bits of real dark. You will only see through to the centre, the real centre, when it's facing you. As it goes over the top and round the edges, all you'll see is the stamen. So it's just darks just on the bits facing you. Now you could carry on adding more detail, a little bit more veining, and 1 or 2 of the leaves could be brought out into detail, but for the sake of this exercise I think I'm going to leave it there. The next demonstration I'd like to do are of clematis. I've put them on a trellis just for a little bit of a different composition. So first of all I'm going to wet the paper all over behind the main focal flowers, just like we did in the first one. Over the background ones. You can see where I've masked out just the middles of the background ones, because the middles have white stamen on this and I didn't want them to go too dull. I think that's evenly damp. Changing brushes, starting off with the pink, I'm going to drop in a blush just around here. Remember, you're going to work brighter than you need because it's going to diffuse and dry lighter. Just drop in a little bit here in the background. I'm now going to drop in some cobalt where I think the sky could be. Maybe a little bit of blue here, because there is often a blue shine on leaves. And then I'm going to drop in the yellowy green first, where I think some of the leaves might want to be. I have drawn some of the leaves on this. And I have put in the trellis that I'm going to use. It's beginning to flow now. If it has dried, just push it just a little bit with a damp brush so that it flows. And then let it dry flat. Now the paper's completely dry, I've mixed up a light green, a mid green and a turquoisey green to paint in the negative shapes. So just putting in a light green here, just to isolate 1 or 2 of the leaves that I've drawn, and dropping in dark as I go, show up some areas. It's always best to vary it. The mid green is sap green on its own. As I come away from the trellis, I'm going to do some blue coloured leaves. as they go dark against light. Just simple leaf shapes, no detail, and then going back into the negative shape. On the next stage of the painting, now it's dry, I'm going to draw in 1 or 2 background leaves so that I can paint the negative shapes. So I'm just carrying through 1 or 2 of the lines. I'm drawing them probably a little bit darker than I would do normally so that you can see them. And then using a medium-sized brush, a number 6 will be fine, just paint the negative shapes again. I've mixed up 2 or 3 greens, a light, a medium and a dark again. It doesn't matter if they're slightly not leaf colour, because you can always adjust that later. You can either glaze them with a blue or a yellow and you'll find that they're perfectly acceptable then. Now I'm going to soften it out towards the edge into a paler shade because I want the centre of interest to be around the trellis. This can be softer. I'm going to have this as a slightly deeper shape so that it will show up that petal. I can always do some more drawing up there later if I want those leaves to come out a little bit more, but I think I'll leave it just there for the background at the moment and I can come back to it later. What I'm going to do now is have it dry and then I shall take off the masking off the main flowers and then paint a coat on those. In this next stage, I'm going to put a wash on all the petals of the focal flowers, just varying the tone slightly towards the middle so that they're deeper towards the middle, lighter towards the edge where the sunlight is coming through. I shall be dampening the petal, doing the one behind the other petals first, dropping in the colour, deeper towards the middle, lighter towards the top, leaving that one to dry and then working maybe alternate petals so that you don't have to stop painting and wait for them to dry. Now, while those are drying, I'd just like to spend just a little bit more time going back into the background and cutting out a few more negative shapes. So I'm going to change brushes, go a little bit smaller, just so that I can do some of the shapes. And any mistakes that you think you've made in the first few washes, you can correct by doing this, and you can work in the negative shape and just sort them out just a little bit more. I've mixed up 2 pinks as I have been doing with the flowers, and I'm going to put a little bit of the veining on now so that you can see the direction of the flower. Start off here, just following up. If you do this with a rigger, you can get a variation in the thickness of the line without changing brushes. Just gives the flower just a little bit of direction. The reason I use a rigger is because if you use a tiny brush with very short bristles, you have to reload it so much more. If you use a rigger, it actually holds quite a lot of paint that enables you to do it in one stroke. You can actually do this while the petal is still damp. If you want soft edges, I'll just do the last one. Follow the curve of the petal, going thinner as you go away from the middle. And I think that's enough veining for now. I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to put some shadows over the top, and I'm going to remove the masking in the middle so that I can just put the tips on the stamen. When I've assessed it and stood back from it, I've just noticed I've missed a small negative shape here that should be green. So I'm just going to pop that in and let that dry. Now, using a slightly bigger brush, what I'm going to do now is paint in the shadows. So I've mixed up a purple colour using Permanent Rose and Cobalt Blue, and I'm going to put the shadows on the clematis that's underneath one of my focal flowers. I have got a reference photograph for this that I can follow. Now this may seem very bright when you're putting it on, but don't forget it will dry lighter, and shadows are always just slightly darker than you think they're going to be. So it's best to be brave when you're doing this. And then the shadow will actually show up this leaf, that's petal that's coming on top. Now I'll carry on and do the shadows on this one. As the sun is coming in this direction, this shadow will cast another one. This petal will cast a shadow just there. You can make them up. If you haven't managed to take your reference photographs with the sun out, you can quite easily just make them up. Now the middle will cast a slight shadow on this back petal here. Soften that out because it will be a soft edge. Just a little bit of a shadow there. Soften it out. I'm just doing the larger areas of shadow first. You can put little bits of shadow where the petals just fold a little bit down the side. I'm not putting too many shadows on this one as I want it to stand out a little. I'm also going to push back one or two of the leaves with the shadow colour that are probably a little bit bright. Everything has to complement the flower, so if the leaves and stalks are looking a little bit too bright, push them back. Now this clematis in the background here, I'm going to push this back so that it's not quite so dominant and the attention is focused on these. Now while that's drying, I'm going to use a small brush. I'm just going to tip the end of the stamen in a reddy brown colour. This just makes more of the centre of the flower. You'll be able to see where they go, where you've masked. And then when that's dry, you're going to soften that off with a wash of yellow. Just so the white isn't quite so glary. And the last one. And we'll let that dry. And while that's drying, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinforce the veining within the darks. So as the shadow comes out here, you reinforce the veining within the shadow, just gives it a little bit more depth. Just take it to the edge of the shadow. I'll just put one or two in here. give that a little bit of form, and then I'm going to let that dry while I put just a small amount of detail on the trellis at the back. Just a little bit of wood grain. You can do these lines where you like, really. You can make them up, or you can get a piece of wood that has grain on it and just follow those. Now the middle of the clematis should be dry now, so using a medium-sized brush I'm going to mix just a little bit of lemon yellow with a little bit of orange and push those back just a fraction, just to sit them down in the centre. You still want them to be quite bright, but just not too much. And let those dry. In this corner here, I feel as though I would like to put in just 1 or 2 more blue leaves, just to balance it a little bit. Just do these freehand with the stalk. So that one can just bring out that petal just a little bit more. Let's drop a little bit more in that one. Well, this one can just have a little bit of warmth in it, I think, so that it's not quite so blue. And then while that's still wet, with just a slightly deeper green, just put a little bit of the veining in that. Pull it down a bit. And then we let it dry. Now these are just the finishing off stages. This one here I feel just needs a little bit more definition, so I'm going to put in 1 or 2 darker areas just to define one petal against another, just to give it a little bit more form than it has. This is just the same as we did on the other petals, but this one has been pushed back, so therefore it needs to be a little bit darker. But keep soft edges where you can. And then I'm going to tip this one on the stamen, just in a soft brown, not too much. And then I'm going to put a little bit of veining on it. Now there's another area just here against the trellis that I would like to push back. So I'm just going to go behind these front petals and just push this one back a little bit so that it just reads a bit better. And also just under here. Also, to bring some of the wood grain forward, I'm just going to lift off a little area there. And there. To give it a little bit of a change of tonality. You can of course straighten all these edges by going up to them with clear water. Just like that, and just blotting them. Sometimes an acrylic brush does this a little bit better, but there's a lot you can adjust with watercolour painting that you might not think you can. even with the background wash. If you find you don't like it, all you have to do is run the whole thing under a tap and take it off. Your pencil lines won't disappear, and then you can start again completely from the beginning. Now there's just an area here I want to make read a little better by just taking through another leaf and bleeding it out into the background again. And I'll just glaze those stalks a little bit behind there now. Push that one back. One of the things that you can do is now do 1 or 2 little bits of veining on leaves. Now the way that you do this, you can draw them in first, but you can paint the negative shapes of the veins. Just carefully, just 1 or 2. Just to add another little bit of detail there, just push that back so that the stem shows up. And I'm just going to green this one a little bit. And make that read a little bit better. And I think we'll leave it at that. For this next demonstration, I've chosen irises. The simple reason being that the flowers are entirely different shape to the last 2 demonstrations that we've been through, and so are the leaves. I have put a background wash on. I've used cadmium yellow, viridian, Winsor blue, and I have dropped some colours of the irises in the background. I've drawn the stalks on top of the wash, and I'm going to now start filling in the negative shapes so that the leaves and stalks come forward. So using a mixture of viridian and Winsor blue, viridian and burnt umber, I shall start just to do the negative shapes and follow them through, dropping in 1 or 2 darks as I go through so they show up a little bit more. I have put a couple of flowers in the background as well, that I can just do the negative shapes round and they'll show up. This wash doesn't need to be too dark all over. As you work towards the edge of the composition, just keep the washes a little bit lighter because you can always darken them later. When I dropped in the background wash, I put some neat yellow in that has just created the effect of sunlight catching some of the leaves as it goes through. And then just fading this side out into the background wash with clear water. And there's another flower here. Remember to go up to the colour with clear water and not drag the colour out. Stop you getting a line. And for your first cutting out, that's more or less all you will need to do. Because you won't need all of the second cutting out, and to overdo it will make it appear too busy. And that's your first stage. Now I've removed all the masking fluid and we should start to paint the flowers now. One of the reasons I've chosen irises is that there are two colours in one petal, and I'd like to just show you how you would do that. You mix up your colours first, so I've mixed up an orangey yellow and a blue for the irises, and I'm going to dampen the petal first and put the two colours on so that they blend with each other. So the yellow wash goes on at the top. Rinse your brush because you don't want the yellow to contaminate the blue. Load your brush with the blue wash, and going round the edge, just pop that in so that it bleeds forward a little bit. But there is a white area in the middle of these that you don't want to cover entirely. So as the yellow bleeds down, the blue will bleed up, and so you will get a light area in the middle. Not too runny. Just drop in a tiny bit of orange just underneath so that that again softens into the yellow. Don't do the main flower first, because if you're going to practice this, you might want to have a little bit of practice before you do the focal flower. I'm just going to work my way around doing the petals now. The flowers that are behind the leaves, I'm just going to paint just slightly darker so that the leaves will show up, so that I know where they're running through. And this one is a bud that's running through that way. So I'll just put a little bit of green on so that I can remember. I'm working behind these petals now, because these are the smaller ones and I would like those to show up. So for the time being I shall leave them white, and then if I feel they need pushing back I can just put a light glaze over them. In actual fact, on my reference picture, this petal is dark, so I'm going to change it around just a little bit and leave it lighter for the time being. So if you're not sure which will show other petals up, just leave them until you can assess it and stand back from it, and it'll often become clear later on in the painting. I'm going to leave it light at the top so that it shows up. I'm just going to darken in one or two more negative shapes so that I then know how much detail to put on the flowers to make them show up. So in the background shapes that I've already cut out, what I shall do is maybe put one or two more shapes in. If you can counterchange the darks next to the lights, it's more effective and will have more punch to your painting. Towards the edge of the painting, perhaps not quite so dark, but don't be too timid on these. Now I have a flower at the top here. Just put a little wash in behind it to make it show up. The centre flower behind the stalks in the middle needs to go back just a little bit more, and the leaves that I've done the negative shapes behind are a little bit too purple. So I'm using a 1/2 inch flat brush and clear water, and just gently moving the brush from side to side and blotting, I'm going to lift a little of the colour out so that this area reads just a little bit better. And then I'm going to adjust the colour with a wash of cerulean so that this will brighten them. Now one leaf will go behind or in front of another, so when one crosses, as they do here, with a cobalt blue, I will just tone back the area where one goes in front of another, rinse my brush and then just bleed it out. And here, same thing, just pushing the one behind back so that the one in front comes forward. And here at the front. Now this one is going to go on top of that one, so with a wash of blue, because it's already green, I'm just going to deepen that as it goes across there, just to break up this leaf. And then this one will go behind that one. And these will go behind those. As this comes under here, I'm going to turn this back a little bit so that it shows up, and this one will go behind this one. Now this leaf up here will go dark against light. Coming through, it will swap to light against dark, and then as it goes behind this one, I think, I'll just turn it back a little bit there. You're continually counter-changing things so that they show up. I'm just going to deepen the purple behind this one so that it separates this flower from the background flower. At this stage, I'm going to darken some of the tonal values on the flowers, not all over, but just in some areas, just to give them a little bit more 3D effect. So using a deeper purple, I'm going to go in towards the centres of the flowers, a little bit more counter change, but still keeping soft edges. And taking the vein up the centre here, changing brushes and taking some of the veining out towards the edge. Following the curve of the petal, a little bit behind here, just to throw these petals forward. Softening it out again. And here, as it comes into the flower. I shall now move on to another flower to do the same. This part here is a very deep violet, and as this comes up through the flower here, softening that out. I'm going to leave a light edge there though, so that it shows up against the background petal. Now come down to this one. This is actually a bud here. I'm just going to make that a very deep purple. Fading it out into the green. Same on this one. pulling out some of the veining while it's still damp. This top piece here is also a bud, so I'm just going to deepen that. And this one here. This petal here folds back, so I'll just tone underneath it so that it gives that effect. Now we come to the veining on the main petals. The start of the vein is a deep brown colour, and then as it goes down the petal it will change to a violet. So I've mixed both colours, and starting off you have usually 3 main veins that come down the centre. Start those off like that. Just change colour and spread the veining as it comes down. Fainter towards the edge, and often the veins then split as they reach the edge. The ones at the side go up and into the side of the petal, so you could start the other way and come in from the edge on these as it curves round. Again, I'm using a rigger which holds more paint, so it gives you time just to create the effect. If you find these are too harsh when you finish them, what you can do is then just glaze a wash over the top, which will soften the harshness of the lines. Now the ones on the side petals are obviously going to follow the contour of the petal, so I will start from the edge of the petal and work inwards, just curving them under as the petal goes away from you. This is of course my focal flower. The other flowers won't need quite so much veining on them, otherwise it tends to look all the same all over, and we do want to avoid having the wallpaper effect. I have removed all my pencil lines now, and when you do that you realise that 1 or 2 areas don't read as well as you would like. So I'm just going to go through and put in 1 or 2 areas that I may have missed or that I want to adjust. Not too much fiddling, but just enough to make it read. So there's an area here that should have been a negative space, so I'll just pop that in a green. This leaf that goes through here I'm going to do in a green. Now this area here I'm not sure about, but I think I'll bring that stalk down there and take this one through here. so that it shows up this leaf, petal rather. Just drop in a little bit more colour there. Now while that's drying, down here I've just missed out a little bit of the edge of the petal that I shall take round there and add a little bit of green. And then this will read just a little bit better. Now as the leaves and stalks come out from beneath the petals of the flowers, they just need pushing back with a deeper green because they would cast a shadow on them. So now's the time to put these in. It will also counterchange your petals a little bit more. And bring them out just here. Take that through there. Here, push this back a little bit. Now the veining has dried, I'm just going to put one more tone on it as it goes back into the flower because this creates just a little bit more recession. Just a little bit on the outer petals, just in the same way, just to create the same effect. Now the leaves can have little bits of veining on. This is up to you whether you think that the composition needs it. It may be on some leaves, maybe not on others. So just on the focal leaves, I'll just put just a tiny bit in, using a rigger again. I feel this painting is finished now. You can carry on adding more detail, but at this stage it's best to stand back, have a look, because you can overwork it. In this video I've tried to choose 3 different flowers that have slightly different techniques for you to try. Different colours, different methods of masking out, and I hope you'll try them on your own paintings. Thank you very much for watching, and happy painting.
Being an artist can be a solitary business. Who can you go to when you need advice? When you want to paint outside but not by yourself? Or when you just need to talk to other artists about the unique experience of creating a painting or drawing? The SAA informs, encourages and inspires over 15,000 artists in 40 countries worldwide. Membership includes a quarterly magazine, competitions and prizes, free insurance for exhibitions and access to local art groups. Professionals, amateurs and beginners are all welcome. Contact us today to find out more. All the great masters learned their craft by studying other artists. Teaching Art brings the modern masters to you on video. We place you on the tip of the artist's brush as you learn how to paint at your own pace whenever you want to. Teaching Art, the art school in your home. People, animals, architecture. How do artists manage to get perspective, scale and proportion right every time? Now it's easy. A drawing projector enables you to do in minutes what normally takes hours, leaving you free to add the creativity. To save time and improve your drawing skills, contact Teaching Art today.